There are some biblical scenes that just need to be filmed. Matt did a pretty good job. I know, nice job. This is one of them. Can you just picture it? Here's Elijah, prophet, who's been traveling up and down Israel, being the troubler to the kings, talking to them about justice and economic equality, and it's been a big bother to them. And he's followed by his trusty servant, Elisha. And when we come to this moment, there's chariots of fire and horses of fire, and Elisha is taken up in a whirlwind, whoosh, into the heaven. And the only thing that's left is this mantle. What is a mantle? Is it a coat? Is it a shawl? It is a stole like this one? What is that? The Bible doesn't really say. In the movie screen of my mind, I have, after the smoke clears and the dust settles and the horses are gone, there's this mantle just floating down from the sky, and it lands in front of Elisha. What is the mantle? Is it a symbol of authority? Is it a symbol of Elisha's power? Is it a blessing? The Bible is actually pretty silent on this topic. It doesn't say anything at all about the mantle, just that Elijah is taken and the mantle is left. The only thing it says is what Elisha does with it. Picks it up, rolls it up, maybe like a towel, maybe like a staff. He strikes the Jordan River, the waters part, and he walks to the other side. And what waits for him on the other side, what he's plunged into immediately, is the economic crisis of his day. Famine was rampant. The gap between the rich and the poor was so wide and widening all the time. There was collusion between the banking institutions and the political institutions. There was general despair, complete lack of hope that anything would be different. People wondering how they were going to live, how they were going to pay this bill or that bill, how they were going to feed their families. One of the first things that happens to Elijah, he gets involved in this in a very personal way. He meets a widow who cries out to him and says, "Elisha, man of God, they are coming to take my children away. They're coming to take them as slaves to pay my debt. What am I going to do?" In that system, it was permissible for the government to take your children as a payment for debt. So not only is that just heartbreaking to lose your children, you also, your children, for a widow, is the way that she continues to make a living. So she would lose her family, she'd have no way to make a living. She says, "They're taking my children." And Elisha says to her, "What do you have to pay your debt?" And she says, "I have nothing, my house is bare. The only thing I have is this one small vessel of olive oil." Elisha says, "Okay, send your children out into the village. Gather all the vessels, every empty vessel, spare none that you can find, and bring them into your house. Close the door and begin to fill. And continue to fill until there is no more oil." And she says, okay, she sends her kids out. The kids go to the town. They get all of the vessels in the town, every single one. They bring them in the house. And the widow begins to fill one vessel, then another, then another, then another, then another. Vessel after vessel after vessel. She fills all these vessels with oil. There's oil running over. More than enough to pay her debts, to live her life, more than enough for the village. How did that happen? Maybe it was the mantle. Maybe some miraculous power transferred to Elisha when he picked up that mantle and wore it. Maybe that was a miracle. But I wonder if there's something else going on. I wonder if the miracle happened earlier. I think the power wasn't in the mantle. The miracle happened a little bit earlier on the banks of the Jordan. The power was in Elisha's decision to pick it up. He didn't have to. He was distraught. As you can see, he was following his master around, begging his master not to leave, refusing to let his master out of his sight, his mentor, his teacher. He ripped his cloak in two, was distraught when Elijah was taken from him. In addition, he was already on the other side of the Jordan. The prophets and all the economic troubles, he was on one side, and that was all on the other. He could have walked away in his grief, in his fear, in his isolation, in his loneliness. But he picked up the mantle. And he went to the waters and he said, "Where is the God of Elijah?" And he struck the waters and the waters parted. Which, of course, for the people hearing this story, and probably for us too, it reminds us of another water parting that happens when Moses parts the waters of the Red Sea. And the Israelites are allowed to go into safety, leave their economic bondage into the land of the Promised Land. I think what happened, I think the miracle, was Elijah picked up the mantle and said yes to the God of Elijah. Yes to the God of Moses. Yes to the God who says, "My people will not live in economic bondage. My people will not live in slavery. I desire there to be enough." When Elisha picked up that mantle and put it on whatever it is, whatever it was, I think it's kind of like a coat. I think what happened is he chose to be God's person. He chose to see the world through the vision of God. He chose to step into that same abundance, that power, that flow, that vision that his mentor Elijah had, that Moses had. And when he chose to do that, everything changed. He comes into the scene, an economic scene not too different than ours, and he refuses to participate in the system of scarcity. Instead, he goes about the business of abundance. He refuses to participate in the despair, and he goes about the business of bringing hope. He refuses to believe that the best that they can scrape together is just a delay, a tiny delay of the suffering. And instead, he chooses to bring and enact and embody life. I think the miracle, the power, was in the choice. We've been talking for the last several weeks about challenging inequality, and particularly economic inequality. And I've been thinking about this, what does it mean? We've looked at it from all different perspectives, lots of great conversations that we've had. And I've been thinking in particular, what is the role of people of faith? What is our role as a faith community, or what is our role as Christians in this question of challenging inequality? And for me, I think it's this. I think not unlike Elisha, we're standing at the Jordan, widening gap between the rich and the poor, widening gap of wealth, rising despair about the ability for upward mobility. Some of us aren't standing at the bank. Some of us are in that Jordan just barely trying to keep our head and not drown. We're standing there. And we have the choice. Do we pick up the mantle? The mantle of compassion. The mantle of abundance. The mantle of anger sometimes. The mantle of life. Do we choose to come to this question of economic inequality as people of faith? Because that is a choice we have every single moment. Of course, we have lots of different roles we play in the world. Parent, landlord, tenant, employer, CEO, wage earner. So many roles. I would say the most fundamental role we have is as God's person. God's person when we come into the world. God's person as we come into the challenge of economic inequality. That we can pick up the mantle of God's vision and know that the God who says, my people will not live in economic slavery. My people will not live in fear. My people will be free. That God, that power of God is here for us. I think the miracle that happened in the story with the widow and the oil is that human choice, human agency, locked up with God's intention. And when that happens, the world is transformed. Here's the thing. I think sometimes that mantle, at least for me, sometimes I think, I don't know if I can carry that mantle. It feels a little bit, is it calling me to be something I'm not, or to a place that I can't go, or I'm not equipped to do that, I'm not Elijah. But the interesting thing about the Elisha story is that Elijah, the first prophet, he did his ministry, he engaged his world, he was a political player. He was always in the face of the kings, bothering them, challenging them, causing a political ruckus. Really important. Elisha went about the business of feeding, healing, loving, being present. Not so much in the political process. For me, that's a really important thing. The mantle, I believe, is not a particular role to play. The mantle is a way of seeing the world. The mantle is the choice to be identified in our very being as God's person in the world, who knows that God acts with us when we put our hands into the service of that vision. We're at the Jordan. We get to choose. And when we choose to pick up the mantle and be God's person, everything changes. Thanks be to God. Amen. Today, as Matt and Joanne sing a song for us, sometimes it's helpful for me to have a reminder, a tangible sign of an internal grace or an internal commitment. And so we have these mantles, if you will, these pieces of ribbon. And if you would like, you're invited to come and pick one up as a commitment, an intention, a hope, a remembrance that you are God's person. You proclaim that every time you come into the sanctuary, every time you offer hope into the world, every time you do the work of justice, which I know that you do. If you'd like a symbol, an affirmation of your intention to be that person in the world, I invite you to come and pick one up now.